رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Once again, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in this endeavor and increase our knowledge and honor us to act upon what we learn so that our knowledge becomes a source of blessing and not a curse for us on the day of judgment. I know our brother Mamoon had advised if we could stick to one scholar at a time, that would be more palatable for the audience. So inshallah, this is the last time I will take extra session on a single scholar. From now on, we will stick to, even though we may be limited in our presentation, because each of the scholars have a lot to teach us. So I will continue the session discussion on Sultan al-Ulama Izzuddin AbdulSalam, but next time when we come, we will try to make sure that we limit each session to one scholar, inshallah, or hero or leader, whatever way you want to describe these great mentors and teachers and leaders. So I want to just briefly touch, which I already mentioned, some of this on this, his asceticism, his piety, something of his achievements, which is he is a man of great achievements and contribution, and something about his works, legacy and fight against innovations. And we will also briefly mention the thorny issue among the scholars, whether he was a Sufi or was against Sufism. There are conflicting appraisals by the scholars on this, and there are reasons for it. Izzuddin was an exemplary scholar who was true to his covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is acknowledged by everyone. There were scholars who differed with him because of the school differences, theological differences, and yet all of them respected him and look up to him and as a mentor, as an exemplar, as someone who stood up, as a spokesman for the conscience of the Muslim Ummah. Nobody doubted his sincerity, nobody doubted his piety, nobody doubted that this is one scholar who practiced what he preached. And he did not fear the consequences, and you have already seen examples of it. I would mention one or more example. A scholar in Islam, this is why today, if you look at the condition of the Muslim Ummah, you will see that what I mentioned, the poet saying that ما أفسد الدين إلا الملوك ورهبان وعلماء سوء ورهبانها. Deen is corrupted by the wicked scholars and rulers. When the scholars fail to fulfill their covenant and their mandate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mandate is to transmit, to be udul. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, يَحْمِلُ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ مِنْ كُلِّ خَلَفٍ عُدُولُهُ. This knowledge of Islam, this knowledge of the Quran and Hadith will be transmitted and passed on by men and women who have the integrity, the character, and piety, and sincerity, and humility, all those qualities and traits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has praised. Allah says in the Quran, مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. Among the people are those who have been true to that which they pledged unto God. There is no reason to translate this rijal as men here. This is just simply expressing that it could be men and women, because as is very, very clear from the Quran, this amana of this trust is not just laid on men, as Allah clearly says. You know, al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minatu ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd. Believing males and females are partners in upholding the truth, commanding good and forbidding evil. You know, so this mandate, this is amana. It's not just on the shoulders of men, and this is very clear for anybody who studies the early history of Islam. Women as well as men were in the forefront, you know, teaching and speaking and struggling for the cause of Islam. And all of us know that the first Shahida was a woman actually who gave her life struggling for the cause of Islam. So witnessing the truth, Shahadatul Haqq, is the mandate, and it is placed squarely on the shoulders of men as women as well as men, or men as well as women, whichever one way you want to put it. And by all accounts, this is the unanimous, and of course there are some of these so-called Salafis who are very rigid in their thinking, who find, you know, some of the views of Izzuddin AbdulSalam, they don't like some of his views. They think that is rationalizing too much, or they differ from the way he has explained the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because these people get bogged down with this, whether Allah has hands and feet and whatever. This anthropomorphism, which is one of the diseases. Even I remember one person came to America. Through one of my students, he sent me a big album, and the whole thing is a discussion of the asma and sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I said to this student, I don't need this, please. I don't need this one, because, you know, see how for them theology or Islamic Aqidah is limited to this discussion of whether Allah has hands and face and things like that. Astaghfirullah, they go too far. But even among their own school, they're supposed to be Hanbalis, there are people like Ibn al-Jawzi and Ibn Aqil who consider this utmost blasphemy. This is complete distortion of the Islamic understanding of God and His nature. But they even condemn them and put them out and declare them as heretics. So they were vexed with Izzuddin, because I have no time here to discuss how the way Izzuddin, but of course Izzuddin recognized that that Quran being inimitable in its style, it uses allegories and metaphors. So some of these things should not be taken literally. We need to affirm the transcendence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without and understand all of these attributes of God and names of God in the Quran in a way that does not compromise His transcendence. So we should not understand them literally as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were some kind of a Santa Claus or a big daddy sitting in the heaven. Astaghfirullah. So Ibn Izzuddin was one of those who fulfilled the above criteria. Nobody would question. His biographers describe him as a man steadfast. We have already mentioned it, but this is every biographer of his just praises him for steadfastness in standing up for truth and justice. He is described as a sword in face of the wicked and the corrupt. Just a fearless. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. At the same time, this man is stern and bold, but at the same time he is humble, because many people have this, they confuse between, that a religious scholar or a leader has to be, yes, he has to stern against wickedness, but he should be humble. This is something, humility of the Prophet ﷺ. He was extremely humble. He never placed himself above anybody, and gentle, humorous, a man of humor. That was the case with our Imams like Abu Hanifa, Malik, and Shafi, and Ahmad bin Hanbal. They were very accessible, and Rasulullah was accessible, and he was a man of humor. We have lost our humor now. We have lost. We don't smile. We don't, as if we need to say smile is a sunnah. Whereas, I had to tell to somebody who wanted to give me a book about the size of the beard. Actually, I was standing in the subway, and this guy came to me and said, Sheikh Ahmad, I have a book, a so-called dissertation on the size of the beard. I said to him, I don't need this book, because I asked him the simple question. Can I ask you a simple question? How many traditions are there from the Prophet about the size of the beard? He said, I don't know. I said, there is nothing specific about the size of the beard, and even all of the traditions of the beard, compare it with the traditions on smiling and being pleasant face, appearing pleasantly. There are more traditions about them than about the beard. So we have lost our priorities. In the case of Izzuddin, because he is a scholar, expert in tafsir and hadith, and akhlaq of the Prophet, because a number of his works is simply about the akhlaq and the ethics of Islam. So while he also uses every opportunity to convey the message through humor. Actually, one time he was passing by a palace, being destroyed, demolished. Maybe they wanted to build another one in its place. So on seeing that, he recited a poem. Of course, I cannot translate the poem as a poem. I'm just taking the sense of it. Why demolish it? Leave it alone as a lesson for those who wish to learn, or a sign for the wise to ponder. Let the mansion tell the tales of its past inhabitants. There is no sweeter tale to narrate. You see, because he's bringing the message, look, these people, remember one king was taking a stroll out of his, after Asr prayer, his big palace, and this Sufi was passing by, and he wanted to convey the message to him. He asked him, can I rent a room in this motel? The king was so shocked. How dare you call this palace a motel? I beg your pardon, can I ask you a question? Tell me who is to live here before. It's my father. What happened to him? He died. who is to live here before him. His father, what happened to him? He died. So what makes you think that you will not die and leave this place? Is there a better way of describing this? This is immortal. People take turns. So this is exactly what Izzuddin, who is a man of spiritual vision, he looks at. But all of us lose this, that we are wayfarers, we are travelers. Of course, this doesn't mean that you just replace your house with a hut and it doesn't protect you from sun and cold and winter and things like that. That's not the understanding of Izzuddin AbdulSalam. He said that's against the masali of the Sharia. Anyway, so when Tatars were ready to invade Damascus, Egyptians were terrified because they invaded Baghdad and Damascus, and now they are on the borders of Egypt. The Sultan is terrified, and of course he is in a quandary. You know what happened? He thinks that in order to, because they have an army, but he cannot maintain them, properly, because he doesn't have the funds to give them proper salary. So he thought this is a big disadvantage faced as he is with this Tatars on the borders of Egypt. So he consulted the chief sheikh, actually, the chief qali, who is Izzuddin at the time. He wanted to, said the sheikh advised him to face the Tatars, He asked the sheikh, what should we do? They are on the approaching. He said, no, we should face them, and I will join you in this jihad, and I guarantee you victory. Look at this spiritual, look at his faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I guarantee. This is the word he used. I guarantee that if you do what I tell you to do, inshallah, Allah will give us victory. You are going to see it. So the Sultan said, but we have no funds in the treasury to finance this war. So I have no choice but to take loans from the business people. Ordinarily, every sheikh, what would be the answer? Go ahead, impose taxes. This is what they are doing now to finance these wars. And they are killing Houthis like anything, and they are short of funds, and then they are introducing all kinds of measures. And of course, an open carpet fatwa is given, it's all fine. Maslaha. So that's fine. Whatever the king does, orders, it shall be done. Okay. Sheikh said, gather all of the jewelry and gold and other savings you and your family members possess. First, do this. Then do the same with the possessions of your officials and convert them into cash. You mean sell them and convert them into cash and pay the soldiers. How, it takes courage and boldness. That's why he has been given this, title Sultan al-Ulama. The emperors fear him. The rulers fear him. Okay. So once you do that, if you still need funds, you are allowed to take loans. Otherwise, you are not allowed. Sharia doesn't allow you to do that or impose taxes. What happened? Sultan obliged and acted according to his advice. He joined the war. Sheikh Izzuddin joined the war also, and they repelled the Tatars. Okay, so you see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why I have no doubt that Izzuddin ibn AbdulSalam, as eminent scholars said, he is one of the awliyaullah. No doubt about that. Sheikh was loved by everyone for his selflessness and shunning favoritism. You know, you have the perfect example in the pious caliphs like Umar ibn Khattab, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman and Ali. You know, although some people find fault with Uthman radiallahu anhu that he showed favoritism. We are not going to get into this controversy, but this may be a propaganda by the enemies of Islam. Definitely nobody can question Umar or Abu Bakr or Ali radiallahu anhu majma'in. They never showed favoritism, and they kept themselves and their families away from making use of the public funds or treasury. And the same example was followed, as we already mentioned, about by Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, because of which he is called Khamisul Khulafai Rashidin, the fifth of the most righteous caliphs. So, because he got this approval from scholars of all denominations, and they loved him, and they never advanced themselves before him. How? Because they would not give fatwa. It's said that in both Egypt and Damascus and Egypt, you know, scholars, prominent scholars who used to give fatwa before Izzuddin AbdulSalam came, they said no. We used to do that before he came, but now we cannot do that. You see how, so you see, we have not just one Izzuddin, there are people like Izzuddin. And of course, we mentioned about his teachers as well, that they were, those who mentored him were also qualified, they had this kind of quality. And of course, the same thing he passed on to his own disciples, great scholars who stood up, you know, as to exemplify, to act as the moral conscience of the Ummah. So they refused to give fatwa, and they also advised the Sultan actually. And one time the Hanafi scholar, simply when he heard that Sultan is against Izzuddin and that he has removed him, this Hanafi scholar went to the Sultan actually and told him, you want to displease Allah? Here is a Waliullah, and you want your rule to be blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have to, you know, apologize to this great scholar. You see how that scholar did not share the fiqh views of Izzuddin, he says the Hanafi. You see how the scholars, when they have this talamun, this they appreciate each other in spite of the differences. You know, this is one big trouble among the Ummah today. We don't recognize this. People are free to choose different views in fiqh. This is not fundamental differences. And in spite of differences, scholars, and that's what the method of Salafus Salih were, as we know that the Sahaba differed actually, and yet they prayed behind each other, prayed for each other and things like, supported each other, things like that. So when he was in deathbed, now you see another of this reveals his real piety and selflessness. Baybars, or this, whatever you want to pronounce, the ruler of Egypt at the time visited him, because this ruler loved Izzuddin. He was better than many others, and he thought, he was very saddened that to hear that Izzuddin is in his deathbed, and he thought, I wish he had lived, you know, more years so that his rule will be blessed by people like him. So, but anyway, he went to see the Shaykh, who is on the breathing his last. So he is in throes of death actually. So he whispered to him that now you are dying, so I want, to appoint your son Abdul Latif as the Chief Justice, Qadi al-Quda. What would an ordinary scholar would do? So of course, this is now something, many of these titles are passed on from father to son, isn't it? What did, just like Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu anhu, Umar ibn Khattab did not want people to choose his son. No. He did not allow his children, to use the relationship with Umar to make business and exploit people and things like that. Never, never. Really. So this is the example that Izzuddin followed. He said straight away, Sheikh right away told him he is not qualified. Actually, his sons are scholars. Actually, Abdul Latif is not, he is a qualified person. He can be a judge, but he doesn't want him. He then suggested another scholar. You know why? Because for him this principle is that you have to appoint the most qualified person. You should not go after less qualified. So who can do the job? Because that's the public interest of the people. So he then suggested another scholar who was not related to him by blood or friendship even. He never, so that he doesn't show any favoritism. So actually the ruler had to accept that proposal. Now, you see that is in deathbed. Biographers say this is a sign of husnul khatima. There is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that if Allah wants to choose someone for his favor, he would make sure that he die in a state of doing what is right, or amalus salih. The seal hid the life with doing something virtuous. So you see, he is breathing his last, and this is his last good deed that he did. So he sealed his life. This is a sign of husnul khatima for him. If Allah wants to choose a person for his favor, he would honor him or her to seal their life with actions that are pleasing to him. So if he were to allow for his son to be the Chief Justice, to serve in that position, that will be favoritism, especially when there are people more qualified than him. Izzuddin's contributions, of course, this whole 10-week course can be on the contributions and the legacy and creative methods and of Izzuddin actually, but we need to mention it here. His contributions are enormous. First of all, he mentored eminent scholars to whom he passed the torch of Islamic revival. Of course, when we say eminent scholars, they were indeed great scholars. Ibn Daqiq al-Eid is one of them, is a great scholar who also was bold to stand and speak the truth. He was also the Qadi, appointed to Qadiship, and then there are similar stories. His confrontation with the ruler, and when he thought he was compromising the principles of justice. And another great scholar is Qarafi. We have this Jackson who wrote his dissertation on Qarafi. His contribution on Usul al-Fiqh is really, really immense. He's a great jurist from North Africa, actually. And there are many others who benefited, who were mentored by Izzuddin AbdulSalam. And Izzuddin also left behind works in various fields such as tafsir, fiqh, usul al-fiqh, tasawwuf, biography of the Prophet, and so on and so forth. And all of these works, they are not unlike scholars who would just simply copy other scholars, make quotations. His works are not like that. His works are creative, independent work, synthesizing, and very, very creative. There is a spirit of independence in him that is not seen in many scholars. Of course, we have scholars who are. He shunned blind taqleed of authorities. One of the sickness of this ummah is this decadence in the Muslim thinking is, Izzuddin AbdulSalam pinpointed that this taqleed mindset ruled the scholars and prevented them from, interpreting and giving rulings of Sharia to address, to cater to the masalih, the welfare and the felicity of the people. One of the big example that now people like Mustafa Zarqa and others have used this is the wisdom from Izzuddin. I want to jump the gun there. This question of Muslims living in economic systems like this. The typical standard static ruling of scholars, haram, 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 haram. So Muslims cannot buy a house, Muslims cannot do anything because everything is interest. Izzuddin AbdulSalam said, he already gave a principle of the Sharia. He said, if everything in an economic system is based on haram, Muslims should not be inhibited, should not restrain themselves from using that system for essential services like their homes and running business. If they do so, what will happen? They will always be at the bottom of the society. I would say that why Muslims are fighting over halal meat. Because everybody wants to prove the other guy is selling haram. Because they think this is the only business they can do. They can buy 10 cows or 12 cows and they have to sell it, make business and nothing else. Other people are doing business and they are thriving, and Muslims are, So, Mustafa Zarqa used this principle. One, I remember two instances where now scholars are reversing. In the early years of Muslim immigrating to England, this Bengali Muslims asked a question to Dr. Mustafa Zarqa. Actually, Mustafa Zarqa is described by his biographer. His father was a great Hanafi jurist, grandfather great Hanafi jurist, great grandfather. So scholars, great Hanafi jurist, and he is a product of that scholarly tradition. He gave the fatwa. This Bengali asked Sheikh Zarqa, we have this option of buying these buildings in London and convert them into renting house or whatever for helping the community. Sheikh Zarqa gave them the fatwa, and the fatwas were based on this principle of Sheikh Sultan al-Ulama. And actually, on the other hand, in India, in Bombay, there were this lot of awqaf Muslims had, and they had this money from this awqaf invested in the bank, they saved in the bank, and it had millions of rupees of interest accrued. And the fatwa of the ulama was, this is filth. So just you cannot use it. So Christian missionaries got that money, the funds, and they used them for establishing their missionary, center and things like that. But the same ulama then later on reversed the fatwa, say no, this. Of course, if Saudi Arabia, who has invested, billions of dollars in these banks, Sheikh Ibn Abbas' fatwa was that they cannot use it initially. So this millions of interest money, if they were to keep it to the bank, what would have happened? Actually, this kind of I shared this kind of views in the early 70s in Jami Mosque, and then complaints were written to Darul Ifta against me that I justify interest. But then the same sheikhs who said it was haram, they reversed their fatwa later on. They said, no, we cannot leave this money to the bank, but we should give it, use it for other services, but a person cannot benefit it for himself. This was their fatwa. Anyway, Sheikh Izzuddin shunned blind taqleed of other religions, called for ijtihad and set the precedent for it. Okay, all of his works are opening the door. I remember he saying that a scholar who studies some of these essential resources in comparative jurisprudence like Al-Muhalla, Mughni and Bayhaqi Sunan, he said that will prepare him or her, to develop the habit of ijtihad, independent, the ability to give independent rulings, without being limited to a single school. And his works were intended to expound the principles and the underlying objectives of the Sharia, so that the scholars don't just look to a single text and run with it and make a wrong interpretation. They have to take the holistic rationale of the Sharia and the higher objectives of the Sharia. And once a person has a sound understanding of this, there is no need for him to be mastering these intricacies of fiqh to be able to come up with opinions. So he distinguished the principles that were constant from the variables. Sharia has a thawabit. Thawabit are principles that cannot be changed. And then these rulings can change, and that's why, this is a point very important, to remember. But unfortunately, many of the scholars just give rulings. They just, when they are faced with an opinion, they refer to a book. Okay, this is it. One sentence answer. And that, what will happen is that wouldn't work, because that may be written for Indian milieu. That here we have a Canadian milieu, different. So, of course, our scholars, Usuliyun, had already said that a scholar who is not aware of the customs and conventions of a place cannot be qualified to give fatwa in regards to those customs, which is different in another country. See? So one has to know the customs, otherwise we may be confusing the culture with the Sharia. This is what happens. We confuse, we think that is, somebody says woman cannot drive. That's a culture in Saudi Arabia. You don't call it a Sharia ruling applicable for, maybe for them, I don't know, but even they are changing now. Astaghfirullah. This is a real problem, when they confuse the culture with the custom, with the Sharia actually. Through the study of the principles of Sharia, he showed that the sole aim of the Sharia is to bring benefit to humans. The book is called Qawaidul Ahkam fi Masalih al-Anam. This is one of these masterpieces. Qawaidul Ahkam fi Masalih al-Anam. Paraphrase, translation is that this laws of Sharia laws, the Sharia laws are simply to cater to the wellness and the well-being and the welfare of humanity. And there is nothing in the Sharia except that it is meant to pave the way for the ultimate felicity of human beings in this world and the next world. Islam doesn't want us to leave this world. So for Izzuddin AbdulSalam, even though he himself was an ascetic person, he doesn't want. Islam is not. Islam doesn't tell us that you leave this world for the next world. No. Welfare in this world, welfare in the next world. And of course, as he made a distinction that as for the okay, maybe I am bringing that point later. Although he was affiliated with Shafi school, he fought against blind taqleed of schools, offered independent rulings without being bound by his school. That's why biographers of Shafi scholars are perplexed whether to place him as a mujtahid in that school or independent. Of course, scholars who study him deeply said, initially he was a mujtahid in Shafi school, but then he became independent of Shafi school as well. Okay, but there is no need to box him in that way, because this whole, as Izzuddin AbdulSalam said, this is a bid'ah that has crept into this Muslim ummah, that of course there is taqleed, there is ijtihad, but to make taqleed binding, is, if we say we are bound to make taqleed of Abu Hanifa or Malik or Shafi, why can't we say we are bound to make taqleed of Sahah, Umar, or, look at the point, the way he is looking at it. So he said taqleed, yes, people who are not able to come up with rulings from the Sharia, who don't have that, they need to follow the authority, yes. But we are not bound, to simply stick to one school or one imam's view in everything. No, there is no basis for that. Even an ordinary Muslim is not bound to stick to one school. Rather, he is free to choose valid opinions as long as he knows this is a valid opinion in another school. You see how this is the understanding of people like Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, who was asked, somebody came to him and said, I wish that Sahaba did not hold different views in fiqh. He said, I am happy that they did. Because now we have different options. We are not limited to one opinion. If we were limited to one opinion, we would be hardship. So that's why this differences is a sign of mercies, shows the latitude and the flexibility of the Sharia. So if a person who is grown up in one school, and that's why people ask, which school you follow? How many times people ask me this question? Because they think that, okay, a Shafi can only ask a fatwa from a Shafi scholar. This is not true. Izzuddin AbdulSalam has completely, undermine this kind of false belief. Now, another great achievement of AbdulSalam is, I will come to that discussion, what is innovation according to him, because there is the word innovation itself a very, very touchy word. Now, but let me say that, innovations in religious practices, it's very, very common, because this is how religions get distorted. We are coming to, inshallah, after we take this break, I'm going to come to studying one of the great personalities, Al-Bayruni, who is not a alim in that sense, but he is a social scientist, but he is a good Muslim, and his views on science and religion is a true understanding, the Quranic epistemology he put. And this scholar has said that in his wonderful work on India and Indian religion, he stresses this, how people introduce innovations in religion, and then the whole face of religion is darkened. So that's why AbdulSalam, religion came, to establish the dignity of human being, and affirming divine transcendence, and this whole idea of fighting incarnation, that man God, woman God, and things like that. People exploiting religion, and asking people to worship, instead of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to worship human beings. All of this starts with this kind of innovations actually. So he was dead opposed to innovations in religion, and starting from the practice, khatibs used to insist that you have to wear a black turban. AbdulSalam abolished this practice, because this is to insist that a khatib has to wear black turban or even green turban. Of course, he can choose what once in a while. There is nothing religious about it, so it's an innovation if you insist on that. And then khatib has to carry the sword and hit the mimbar 3 times before he delivers the khutbah. Maybe to send a message that if you oppose me, I will use the stuff. Na'udhu billah. So this practice, both of these practices he abolished, that it is innovation which in worship. And how often you go to some of these masajid which has this practice of delivering khutbah in Arabic? What they do is they chant this in Arabic. Whereas, you see, AbdulSalam understood, if you look at the khutbah delivered by Rasulullah, it's education. It's teaching people. How often you read that the Sahabiya learned this lesson from the Prophet as he is teaching from the Mimbar. You have so many reports like that. Prophet correcting people. So it's a teaching, method. So Mimbar was the university. The Prophet trained the companions of the Prophet. So for the Prophet, that's why Aisha said Prophet knew how to communicate, because by the time he finished the khutbah, people got the essential message, because he did not use too many words. He did not sing, he did not chant, he was not verbose. It's very articulate. You can measure, you can count the words. It was brief and to the point, and repeated the main point 3 times. And by the time khutbah finished, people learned. So that's why AbdulSalam replaced this chanting by using the khutbah for communication, teaching people. Okay, so that's very, very important. That's why some of these things, it's a reflection, why we are in this you have this opportunity to teach people from the mimbar, and it's all wasted. And all of this, na'udhu billah, done by people who claim to be Hanafis. Whereas the Hanafi school is not a requirement at all that the khutbah has to be in Arabic. Every single authentic source in the Hanafi school says it's not a requirement for the validity of khutbah that it should be in Arabic. Whereas the other schools are the one who are saying that. But the people who practice that is the Hanafis. So, and yet they claim to be Hanafis. I have to mention this, Of course, there was some people don't like me for that. Because they think that I am from India and yet I am opposing them. What they are doing, astaghfirullah, it has nothing to do whether you are Indian or not Indian, because we have to speak the truth. You understand? He discontinued the practice of praising rulers. The khatibs used to use the khutbah to curry favor with the rulers, so mention their names and praise them. He abolished that, and of course he just prayed for their guidance without naming them and things like that. And ask Allah for mercy to guide them and have mercy on them. And there is another practice which you see in some masajid after the salah. They have the salawat on the Prophet. After the salah, everybody join Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. They sing that thing. He abolished that practice because you know why? That was not done by the Prophet or the companions or the Salafus Saleh. Prophet taught us to make dhikr, la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la, Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam, and of course tasbih and all this. This is the practice taught by the Prophet and followed, and he replaced it with that. And of course then there is this big innovation called Salatul Raghaib, which is the whole method is also a disfiguring of the interfering with the form of prayer as well. And then the prayer on the 15th of Sha'ban, people gather in the masjid on the eve of the 15th, and they think that there is a prayers. So Izzuddin AbdulSalam did not find any authentic hadith for that precedent, so he abolished that. But of course, our Mufti, from Pakistan, what is his name? Is a vehement advocate of that, some of this. And of course, he is also of the opinion that uncovering the head is makruh. Of course, there is, whereas Imam Abu Hanifa himself said, if a person take off his hat out of humility, that's good. And then, of course, he is claiming to be a Hanafi scholar actually. So, he also declared another practice that some of this, you may have gone to some of the janaza, they bury the dead and then this sheikh is standing there, oh man, now you have died, Munkar and Nakir is going to come. When he asks you what is your religion, make sure you say my religion is Islam. When the angel of death, Munkar and Nakir ask you who is your prophet, make sure you say is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and giving the answers. And some of them even write down this answer and include it in the shroud. It's part of the shroud. And sometimes they make something, they call it something else for barakah with that inside that shroud and things like that. So they are giving him answers. This is, maybe they were doing that when they were writing exams, they were committing fraud. So this is fraud. Actually, a person has to be able to answer these questions, not by somebody giving him prompt or reminding him. Said that this is a bid'ah actually. Izzuddin AbdulSalam said there is no precedent for it. But there is talqeen, and that talqeen is what? Talqeen is a person is dying, and those who are attending should make sure this person dies with husnul khatima, saying shahada, la ilaha ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna muhammadar rasulullah. Just remind him. Once he said it and he didn't say anything else, don't bother him anymore. So that's the talqeen that's prescribed. The other talqeen is a bid'ah, and of course he abolished that. Another thing is definition of bid'ah. Now bid'ah is used as a weapon against everything. Somebody came to me when I was imam in foundation. There was this speech at the podium. We had a program there, and somebody came to speak. So we have this podium near the mimbar or beside the mimbar. So one brother came Fajr time to me, so mad. What do you think you are? You are Bush? Meaning President Bush. Because what? Are you Bush? You introducing this kind of podium into the masjid? For him, this is innovation. Okay, by the same thing, logic, everything should be innovation. Everything. So they use this word bid'ah, out of place actually. Bid'ah means innovation, but innovation, not all innovations are bad. So, we cannot use this word loosely. We have to understand. First of all, Izzuddin AbdulSalam made a distinction between masalih of deen and akhirah from the masalih of dunya. He said, masalih of deen, you only know through revelation. Masalih of dunya, like what? Building bridges and all these things. You don't need revelation. Rasulullah already said, Antum alam bi umuri dunyakum. You know better how to manage your affairs of this world. So, I remember one guy coming fresh from Medina as alim used to tell people, you are not bound in Sharia to obey the traffic signs and things like that, because the Jahiliyyah law. I said to him, this is the masalih, this is a maslaha. Doesn't Sharia teach us that we have to protect life, save lives, and these are meant to save lives. That's nothing against the Sharia. This is not legislation against Allah. This kind of legislation doesn't have nothing to do, it doesn't have to be, you don't need to look to the specific letter of the Quran or the Hadith for it. These human beings have discovered this saves lives. So it's part of the Sharia. You don't. And this guy also, because we're under the impression that he cannot face women while teaching, so while teaching women, he will give the back to them. So he will be teaching them. If there are women sitting there, he would not face them. He would be, astaghfirullah. All of this thing has nothing to do, actually, first of all, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, aqbala ilayha biwajhihi. When a woman came to address the issues, when the Prophet was sitting with men, the Sahaba, a woman comes as a spokesman for women. So he said, فَأَقْبَلَ إِلَيْهَا, the Prophet turned to her to listen to her attentively. So, eyeball to eyeball. It doesn't mean you are lustfully staring at her. You understand? Communication, you have to. So, this is all distorting and disfiguring the Sharia actually. Izzuddin's exposition of Masali clearly made that distinction between Masali of religion and Masali of dunya. The former is known only through revelation, while the latter is known through reason and experience. You see how important the division is? He divided innovations into 5 categories. Number 1, obligatory. Like what? Compiling the Quran, writing books, and now what our brother Mamun is doing, this communication method. Can we, Prophet did not use that, so we cannot use it? No, we can. These are modern ways of communication. Sometimes it becomes obligatory. If the message cannot be disseminated except through this way, or if the kuffar are using it and propagating their ideology and you don't use it, in this case you should be obligatory according to the understanding of Izzuddin. It's obligatory to use this kind of, because otherwise you are defeating the whole, you are not helping the cause of raising the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, of course, in the same category, when they have different sciences originated, you have fiqh, usul al-fiqh, you have tasawwuf, you have all these branches of knowledge, and religious knowledge, sciences as well as worldly sciences. All of the beneficial knowledge, fall in this category. Corrupt practices or actions wholly condemned by Sharia. Of course, the second is haram innovations. Like what? What are the haram innovations? All corrupt practices, actions condemned by Sharia, like bribes, unjust taxes. And of course, he mentioned specifically appointing those who are not qualified to offices simply because he belongs to the princely class or whatever, or passing on, this authority from father to son. You see, he's attacking monarchy actually. Now monarchy becomes a sunnah. Because people say, we cannot have democracy. Of course, you cannot have the democracy in the Western way of democracy, but involving people in the decision making and consulting them is essential. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered His messenger, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. So, as opposed to that, what do we do? The authority is passed from father to son. He said it is haram. According to Ibn Izzuddin AbdulSalam, it is haram to pass it on from father to son, because it has to be going to the most qualified. And then, of course, now third, practices we can infer from the sources are recommended. So you have haram, you have wajib, obligatory, and then you have haram innovations, and then you have recommended innovations. Like what? Taraweeh prayers. Nobody can say that Taraweeh prayer is a bid'ah. Yes, it's an innovation, but it's a recommended innovation. And innovations to maintain law and order, these are all recommended. Sometimes obligatory also. Now, undesirable innovations include setting aside specific days for fasting or prayer. Of course, a person can choose, but I cannot say, everybody must fast, so many days a month, or pick a certain day specifically unless it is prescribed by the Sharia. So, specific days or specific places other than what is prescribed by the lawgiver, that's an undesirable innovation. Permissible innovations include customs and practices that are intended to enhance the comfort and ease of life, as long as they do not contradict the principles of the Sharia. You see, so there is so much latitude in there. Things are permitted unless forbidden. And that's when it comes to worldly matters. Things are permitted unless forbidden. You see how, his definition of bid'ah is. Okay, is that okay? Am I going too fast? It's okay? Okay, now we will come to the last point, because there are a lot of things to discuss more, but I don't want to keep this on and on. One thorny issue about the biography of Izzuddin AbdulSalam is Was he a Sufi? One group vehemently opposed the whole concept because they are against the whole idea of tasawwuf and Sufism. And they say, one group say that he is affirming his Sufism, another group denying it. The latter group who deny that he was a Sufi say, no, this is a very rational, his understanding of the Sharia is rational. So according to these people, tasawwuf is not rational. Tasawwuf, that is a wrong understanding of tasawwuf. Even, okay, I don't want to mention that point, but when I discuss Ibn Khaldun, I will bring that point. Of course, Dr. Iqbal, I will be discussing, I will bring that point later on, inshallah. How even the greatest Muslim intellectuals found a proper place for tasawwuf in the scheme of things. But of course, what they mean by tasawwuf is not what is today practiced, the cult. That's not what they mean by tasawwuf. So his strong emphasis on Sharia, they say that he is a man of Sharia, of course, no doubt, but there is no contradiction between Sharia and the real tasawwuf. But these people think that because he is a man of Sharia, he must be opposed to tasawwuf. And then, of course, he is tirade against innovations and certain Sufi practices. Because of that, they think that he is anti-Sufi. But those who affirm his approval or even affiliation to tasawwuf, they are on stronger side because there are a number of works genuinely attributed to Izzuddin AbdulSalam, which are really expounding the spiritual basis, the genuine tasawwuf. Actually is bringing it from the Quran, because for him the Quran is all about ethics and spirituality. The Sharia is only one part of it. Quran is about people qualifying themselves with the best of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they point that he studied under the famous Sufi Sheikh Shihabuddin Suhrawardi. He is the author of Awariful Ma'arif, one of the great works in tasawwuf. And he also studied Kushairi's Risala, Principles of Tasawwuf, which is, Kushairi is a genuine scholar and Sufi, and he studied, Izzuddin had studied this work as well. This issue can be settled if we make distinction between genuine tasawwuf and pseudo tasawwuf. Genuine tasawwuf is tasawwuf that is in harmony with the Sharia. And pseudo tasawwuf is people who dispense with the Sharia, who introduce innovation, who parade as Sufis, and they carry themselves as Sufis and then exploit people, ask people to kiss their hand and feet, and use this spirituality for making money and things like that. Actually, Izzuddin attacked this kind of charlatans, and there is a beautiful poem that he composed. I don't want to translate the whole thing, but some of the points of this poem that he is saying, he is crying over the fact that the tasawwuf is the heart of Islam, but now in the hands of the charlatans, it has become a biggest obstacle in the path of those who want spiritual attainment, because these people use this for what? To exploit the masses and have fame and name for them, and then make money, Whereas tasawwuf is all about realization of spiritual virtues, purification of soul, and purging the soul of vices, and utter devotion and communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the heart of tasawwuf. But he attacks those who confuse tasawwuf with wearing clocks and making a false display of spiritual states, using it as a bait to exploit people. and earn fame and wealth. This is a big money. You know, biggest industry in Pakistan and India, what's the biggest industry there? Tombs, grave. I had my colleague in McGill University, the man is studying a PhD. You know, his father was the main person in the Gulbarga, you know, Dada Ganj Bakhsh, I think. And he is the Sajjada Nashin, he's the next in line. I used to ask him, you are a rational person. And you are, and you know, I heard that now he is the man in charge. His father has died, and people prostrate to him, make sujood to him. And Hindus and Muslims, everybody visit that home for blessing astaghfirullah and give money, and this money, big wealth they have accumulated. That's what he is. He's calling them robbers. AbdulSalam called them robbers and filthy ones who block the path of genuine spiritual travelers. You know, that is. Okay, so Izzuddin was a devout person who was recognized for his spiritual graces. I want to finish this by citing one incident. Of course, there are many others. Interesting story about him which reveals his spiritual intuition. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give, you know, people who are devoted to him some insight which is not ordinarily given to others. He had a very pious friend. He was one of the awliyaullah who used to send him gifts every year. Once he sent a big parcel of gifts which included a container of cheese. So he sent someone with this parcel. One container, you know, bottle had cheese in it. The container fell from the hands of the messenger and it was broken into pieces. The man was distressed, the messenger who carrying this parcel, because this whole container broke. So a Christian merchant saw it. He told him, I have a better container, you know, of cheese to replace it. So the man bought it from him and included it in the parcel and took it to the sheikh. The sheikh received the parcel, and no sooner he opened it, he returned the container with the cheese. You know why? When the messenger asked why he had done so, he said, it was made by a woman, a Christian woman whose hands were soiled by handling pork. Because she was, you know, handling pork, and with the same hand she was making cheese. So he immediately returned this. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that insight. Maybe all of us have eaten already one or two pig, because we may have, you know, this is one of my friends said, Muslims living here may have eaten, you know, one or two pig before they have died. You know, among his prayers, constant prayers were, it's a sign of his utter devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. O Allah, honor us so that we understand your book, act upon it, and mold our character by its ideals, ponder its deeper meanings. Nothing is possible without your will. O Allah, bless us to prefer you over everything else, and grant us consolation through it, and make us constant in devotion to you. So, of course, this long prayer, I just took a part of it. With this I stop. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Allahumma arzuqna hubbaka wa hubba rasulik wa hubba man yuhibbuk wal hubba alladhi yuqarribuna ila hubbik. Ya Allah, inspire us to love you, inspire us to love your messenger and to love those who love you, and grant us love that bring us closer to you. Amen.